We're heading back into the Duel Monsters era to take a look at the archetype loved by many, but especially the Rule 34. We're taking a look at the Amazoness archetype, which is the semi-final legacy of the Worthless archetype, which will be featured on this series, and it actually had two users as well. In Duel Monsters, it was used by Mai Kujaku, who used them alongside Harpy Ladies, which is kind of an odd mishmash, but aesthetically it kind of fits. And then in GX it was used as a pure deck by Tanya, who was one of the 7-star assassins in GX Season 1. So yeah, this is an archetype that's all about the battle phase, and it was featured in Legacy of the Worthless because it really didn't excel that at being a formidable battle phase archetype. But they actually received some new support, so let's see how they fare nowadays. We start off with their first level 2 monster, Amazoness Scouts. This is a level 2 with 500 attack and 1100 defense. Most of them are warrior type monsters. There are like only 3 monsters in the archetype who are not warrior. So anyway, Rhoda is your friend here, and I'm going to be mentioning Rhoda a lot here. And during either player's turn, you contribute this card. This turn, face-up Amazoness monsters you currently control cannot be destroyed by monster effects and cannot be destroyed by other card effects as well. Okay, so first of all, the only problem I have with this card is that it's actually one of the only available non-battle protection effects the archetype has. And this is also a problem because this is a level 2 monster that's very easy to run over, and not to mention the opponent can remove them by other means before you even get to activate this effect. And yeah, it's actually worth running at some spots in the extra deck because you actually do need some sort of effect protection, and this is one of the only, like I said, ways to do it. So yeah, run one or two of these just because, well, they are somewhat necessary in the deck. Next up, we have their final level 2, which we have Amazoness Baby Tiger, which is one of their newer pieces of support. First of all, it's one of their first monsters which is not a warrior, it's a beast monster instead. And this card's name becomes Amazoness Tiger while on the field or in the graveyard, and if an Amazoness monster is normal or special summoned to the field while this card is in the hand or graveyard, you can special summon this card, and you can only use this effect once per turn, and it gains 100 attack for each Amazoness card in your graveyard. Okay, so first of all, the name changing effect to Amazoness Tiger is somewhat relevant here because Amazoness Tiger is a monster we'll be taking a look at later, and the said monster is required as one of the fusion materials for one of their fusion monsters when we'll get to it in a bit. And yeah, this one has a pretty neat special summoning condition, as it can basically dump him to the graveyard with Foolish Burial, and also it'll trigger when an Amazoness monster is normal or special summon, and basically giving you 2 monsters. It's a hard once per turn, yeah, I know, but still, it's essentially a 3-off staple simply due to the fact of this card's amazing swarming capabilities, and not to mention it's a marginally better card than the original Amazoness Tiger, but we'll get to that soon. It combos super well with Amazoness Spy, which is another one of their newer pieces of support. It's a level 3 warrior, our first level 3. And you can reveal one other Amazoness monster in your hand and special summon this card from your hand. You can only use this effect once per turn, and when this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can target an Amazoness monster in your graveyard except itself and return it to the hand or shuffle it into the deck. The graveyard recycling effect is kind of neat, although it will rarely ever go off since this will always, I repeat, always be used as link material or fusion material for some of their extra deck monsters, and it'll not even live long enough to get into the battle phase. So yeah, but anyway, this is essentially a 3-off staple, just like Baby Tiger, despite the once per turn restriction, a hard once per turn restriction. Now we move on to their last new piece of support for now in terms of the monster lineup anyway. and that is Amazoness Princess. It's our final level 3 as well. Oh no, it's our semi-final level 3. And this card's name becomes Amazoness Queen while on the field or in the graveyard. You can, if this card is normal or special summon, you can add one Amazoness spell or trap from your deck to your hand, and you can only use this effect once per turn. When this card declares an attack, you can send one other card from your hand or field to the graveyard to special summon an Amazoness monster from your deck in defense position, except Amazoness Princess. Honestly, yeah, this is another one of their 3 of staple, because again, the name treating as Amazoness Queen also plays in line with their main deck boss monster, which we'll get to soon. And not to mention, said Amazoness Queen is also required as one of the fusion materials for one of their fusion monsters. Searching out a piece of the back row upon being normal or special summoned is also pretty neat. Some of their older cards are not that good, honestly, but their newer cards are extremely worth it. And not to mention, if you actually do decide to engage in battle with this thing, you can basically summon any Amazoness monster from the deck, which is highly appreciated. So yeah, absolutely max out on this gal. And their final level 3 is Amazoness Blowpiper. Select one face-up monster your opponent controls, and during each of your standby phases it loses 500 attack until the end of this turn. Oh god, this is so slow you can really feel it when it really hits you when you read that effect. So yeah, anyway, this used to be a decent first turn phase down several years ago, several billion years ago I should say. But nowadays it's been invalidated by other much better support, so you essentially don't run this at all anymore. And now we move on to their first level 4, which is the aforementioned Amazoness Tiger. You can only control one of them, and this card gains 400 attack for each Amazoness monster you control this time. And your opponent cannot attack any face-up Amazoness monsters except this one. I would have loved this a lot more if it didn't have the clause of you can only control one Amazoness Tiger, because if you can control 2 of these, that would completely prevent the opponent from attacking, which would be a very decent option for the time this card was released. But as it is right now, it's a very inconsistent card to consider, and the only way you would actually want to run this is because it's actually used as fusion material for one of their fusion monsters, and thus it was made searchable by fusion conscription, so there we have that at least. So yeah, run by preference if you somehow are not in love with Baby Tiger, because he looks just awesome. So yeah. And now we move on to Amazoness Archer, which is actually the very first Amazoness card ever to be made, way before archetypes were even a thing. And its effect is that you can tribute 2 monsters to inflict 1200 damage to your opponent, and mind you, this effect is not once per turn. And yeah, you essentially run 0 or 3 of these, as in you either completely ignore it due to not having anything to do with the rest of the archetype, or you build your entire deck around Amazoness Archer. And just like Cannon Soldier, Toon Cannon Soldier, Shadow Priestess of Ohm, or any other of those similar cards, this card is banned in the OCG because, yeah, they have a rule where every card with an effect like this needs to be banned immediately, so yeah. Their next monster is Amazoness Sage. At the end of the damage, if this card attacked and is still on the field, target one spell or trap your opponent controls and destroy it. Why at the end of the battle phase? Why not? I get that the fact that they are supposed to be heavy on the battle phase, but why couldn't have this been like a once per turn pop a piece of back row? Because that would have been awesome for the time this card came out. But no, it's barely worth running because of this thing, and yeah, it's waste of an amazing piece of artwork, if anything. So yeah. Next up we have Amazoness Fighter, and its effect is that you take no damage from attacks involving this card. Yeah, for an archetype that's all around the battle phase, this does seem kind of like a standard effect, if anything. However, you will rarely ever consider running this because this thing has literally a straight upgrade in its own archetype, that being Amazoness Swordswoman. And while your opponent, while you take no battle damage from battles involving this card, the opponent takes all the battle damage you would have taken from battles involving this card instead. And yeah, this is a card that was actually a pretty unique thing for the time this card was released, because uh, people used to actually run this thing, and due to it being a level 4 warrior, people used to run this thing in very easily searchable decks that could basically search out warrior monsters, along with either decreasing this card's attack or increasing the opponent's monster's attacks and crashing into them for like ridiculous damage. And yeah, this card is kind of like a one-trick pony, but it can actually save you on quite a few occasions if you summon her at the correct time. And yeah, it's a decent beat stick if you decide to actually use her for destroying the opponent's stuff. So yeah, it's essentially a 3-off in any Amazoness build. Now we move on to another level 4 Amazoness Chainmaster. When this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can pay 1500 life points and look at your opponent's hand, and then add one monster from their hand to your hand. And yeah, this is pretty pointless in pretty much all the wrong ways. But the fun fact is that this card, Exchange, Battling Boxer, Cheat Commissioner, and I don't think there are any other cards that... Yeah, those are the only 3 cards that can basically snag the stuff from your opponent's hand, although Exchange can basically only pull monsters from your... This thing can only pull monsters to your hand from your opponent's hand. Exchange can literally add any card from the opponent's hand to your hand. And Cheat Commissioner is only limited to spell cards, so yeah. It's a funny little thing you can experiment with if you really want to screw over Exodia players and steal their pieces. And yeah, it's pretty much not worth running, and you're better off saving that 1500 life points for a Solemn Strike or any other life point paying cause that will actually benefit you, like the majority of the Solemn Brigade. Now we move on to Amazoness Trainee. Monsters destroyed by battle with this card are returned to the bottom of the deck instead of going to the graveyard, and if this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, it gains 200 attack. I will give it credit. It actually shuts down Grave-independent decks such as Burning Abyss or Lightsworns, and yeah, I will give it credit at least for that, but other than that, it's a pretty subpar card. But again, you run it because it's one of their better level 4 beat sticks, so yeah, I guess all is forgiven then. And according to the wiki lore, this is actually Amazoness Chainmaster, the younger version of Amazoness Chainmaster, so yeah. Funny how it's actually better than the OG Chainmaster in that regard then. And now we move on to the final level 4, Amazoness Paladin, whose only effect is that it gains a grand total of 100 attack for each Amazoness monster you control. And if you didn't get it, this is supposed to be a 2200 attack beat stick if your field is swarmed with one of Amazoness monsters. And again, you run this because it's one of their better level 4 beat sticks, which is kind of depressingly sad. And yeah, that's pretty much everything I have to say about this thing. And their final main deck monster is Amazoness Queen, which is a level 6 with 2400 attack and 1800 defense. And all it does is prevent Amazoness monsters you control that from being destroyed by battle. And yeah, it's very underwhelming, and the card doesn't even have a special summoning condition. And again, you mostly run her because she's also searchable by Fusion Conscription and can be used as fusion material for one of their fusion monsters. But again, the battle destruction effect is actually pretty it's pretty prevalent in the archetype, although it actually goes against the logic of their field spell, which we'll get to soon. But anyway, let's go on to their extra deck monsters, first of which we have Amazoness Pet Liger. This is a level 7 fusion monster which requires Amazoness Tiger and any Amazoness monster in order to make, has 500 attack and 2400 defense. And once per battle, if this card attacks during damage calculation, you can make this card gain 500 attack during that damage calculation only. And if your Amazoness monster is attacked an opponent's monster after damage calculation, you can target a face-up monster your opponent controls that loses 800 attack, and monsters your opponent controls cannot attack Amazoness monsters you control except this one. Again, if you actually manage to make this thing and then revive Amazoness Tiger per se, you can actually prevent the opponent from attacking, which is actually quite good nowadays, and I presume that they made this thing inherit Tiger's effect is because they realized they made a mistake by slapping that you can only control one Amazoness Tiger you control onto the card for some silly reasons. They wanted to correct said mistake by releasing this thing. However, among their two fusion monsters, this is certainly not a staple because, again, the Amazoness archetype is all about the battle phase, and due to the fact that it requires one of their monsters which is not even worth running as material, makes it worth running at 1 max. So yeah. However, a monster you would like to pay attention to is the level 8 fusion, Amazoness Empress. This card requires Amazoness Queen, and any Amazoness monster you control has 2800 attack and 2400 defense, and other Amazoness cards you control cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. If your Amazoness monster attacks a defense position monster, inflict piercing damage, and if this face-up fusion summoned card is destroyed by battle or leaves the field because of an opponent's card while its owner controls it, you can special summon an Amazoness Queen from your hand, deck, or graveyard. So essentially this is an easy 3-off staple in the archetype because not only does it provide a cipher level protection to your Amazoness monsters and all your other cards, and it also floats on into Amazoness Queen from anywhere except the banner zone, which is really important because you can use said Queen to basically go into another Amazoness Empress, and given the fact that an Amazoness Queen prevents the monsters from being destroyed by battle, you can basically have an added layer of protection if the opponent has used up all of its effect destruction during that turn in order to protect your monsters, so you can basically go into the Empress with a bit of safety. So yeah, Amazoness Empress is a definite 3-off staple in the archetype and a definite top tier waifu. Next up we move on to their back row, first of which we have their field spell, Amazoness Village. All Amazoness monsters on the gain 200 attack. Once per turn, when an Amazoness monster is destroyed by battle or a card effect and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon one Amazoness monster from your deck with a level less than or equal to that Amazoness monsters in the graveyard. And yeah, this is actually this was a formidable field spell back in the day at the end of the GX era and the start of the early Synchro era, and nowadays it's not all that useful. The battle boost it provides is fairly insignificant. The destruction effect can miss timing quite a lot because of the freaking when as opposed to if. And yeah, the summon is also level restricted, so you cannot float into Amazoness Queen that easily unless Liger or, well, you cannot float into Queen unless the fusion monsters have been destroyed. So yeah, a questionable card to even consider nowadays. Next up we have Amazoness Spellcaster. Target one Amazoness monster you control and one face-up monster your opponent controls and switch the original attack of those targets until the end of this turn. Now if this didn't target, I would have called it a fantastic card, since it can basically give your Amazoness monsters the attack values of some very formidable beatsticks, but again, understandable that it's until the end of the turn. And if it were also a quick play spell, it would be a lot nastier in comparison, but as it is right now, it's a perfectly fine choice, but can clog up your deck on occasion, because you won't be having any decent targets all that often for this thing to go off, so yeah. Anyway, next up we move on to their equip spell, Amazoness Heirloom. Equip only to an Amazoness monster, and once per turn that monster cannot be destroyed by battle. After damage calculation, if the equipped monster attacks a monster, destroy the attacked monster. Honestly, this is actually a pretty good buff, no question about it, but the problem, again, lies in the fact that it's barely searchable beyond stuff like Amazoness Princess. So, yeah, you might actually want to run Hidden Armory as well, because this is actually a fairly good buff, and I would have loved if they released an updated field spell with an effect like this. So, yeah, definitely worth running, no question about it. And now we move on to the continuous spell, Amazoness Fighting Spirit. If an Amazoness monster attacks a monster with higher attack, the attacking monster gains 1000 attack during damage calculation only. Skyscraper is an archetypal thing for elemental heroes that does the same thing, and it does not see competitive play, and why would you even think that this actually saw any play as well? So yeah, if this was a part of the field spell, then I would be talking different story here, but it's not, so don't ever bother with this. Next up we have the Amazoness Call, which is another one of their newer pieces of support and their final spell card. Take one Amazoness card from your deck, except Amazoness Call, and either add it to your hand or send it to the graveyard. During your main phase, you can banish this card from your graveyard and target one Amazoness monster you control. This turn, that monster can attack all monsters your opponent controls, once each, and also all the other monsters you control cannot attack. This is an absolute masterpiece and should never be ran at any less than 3, as in the first effect is either a search or a Foolish Burial Goods, or the original Foolish Burial, which is nothing to scoff at. And not to mention the graveyard effect can basically turn your powerhouse Amazoness monster into an Asura Priest, which is again also nothing to scoff at. And yeah, this can basically do wonders with their fusion monsters, especially Pet Liger if you actually care about building an extensive deck built all around him. So yeah, it's a good card and absolutely max out on this thing. Now we move on to the trap cards, first of which we have Queen Spawn. Activate only when an Amazoness monster you control that destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard. Special summon a level 4 or lower Amazoness monster from your deck. Now, if this was a continuous once per turn, I would have called it a very good card, but sadly it's not, so it's barely worth running because all it does is clog up your main deck space for a very inconsistent Swarm Fodder. Next up we have Amazoness Willpower. Select one Amazoness monster in your graveyard and special summon it in attack position. It cannot change its battle position and must attack if able. When this card is removed from the field, destroy that monster, and when that monster is destroyed, destroy this card. Yeah, essentially you just run Monster Reborn or Call of the Haunted instead, and in fact this card actually came out during the time when Call of the Haunted was limited, and one format later it went back to unlimited, so Amazoness Willpower was rendered immediately unplayable due to the fact. So yeah, not worth playing. Now we move on to Amazoness Archers. When an opponent's monster declares an attack while you control an Amazoness monster, change all monsters your opponent currently controls to face-up attack position. Flip effects are also not activated, yeah, like that if ever mattered. And they lose 500 attack, also they must attack this turn if able. This is one of those cards from 1 billion years ago that was used like casually once against a very slow player that used an archetype that was even worse than Amazoness monsters, and if you scratch any monster for 500 attack they won't even give 2 shits about it, so you shouldn't ever run this thing, so yeah. Next up we have Dramatic Rescue. Activate only when a card is activated that targets an Amazoness monster. Return the targeted monster to its owner's hand and special summon one other monster from your hand. I'm not sure what was wrong with just making this an archetypal beast soul swap considering the theming, and also for some reason you can summon any monster, not just Amazoness monsters, so I guess that's the compensation for making this thing as terrible as it is, because I'm not sure even sure the purpose of what this card is supposed to do. I mean, it was used back in the day to summon Queen a bit easier, but that's the only use I can think of this thing, so I'm not sure. Don't run it. Run it if you really feel like it, but I wouldn't recommend it. Next up we have Amazoness Shamanism. Destroy all face-up Amazoness monsters you control, then you can special summon any number of a level 4 or lower Amazoness monsters from your graveyard in face-up defense position up to the number of monsters you destroyed by this effect. Now, if this comboed with the field spell, I would have called it alright-ish, even though it also blows up your entire field for no reason. So, yeah, again, if you're... I wouldn't recommend this unless you can somehow combo it with something that can basically be used as effect destruction fodder that can basically prove useful here. But yeah, this is such a specific thing to like consider that it's honestly not even worth looking at further. It's kind of like it's a really bad version of an archetypal soul charge. So yeah, I guess some of you can consider it since soul charge is banned at the moment, but please be patient and wait for it to return off the ban list, because this thing is not a worthy replacement. Their semi-final card is Amazoness Onslaught, their final new piece of support from very recently, and it's a continuous trap that says, once per turn during the battle phase, you can special summon one Amazoness monster from your hand, and if you do it, gains 500 attack until the end of this turn, even if this card leaves the field. After damage calculation, if your Amazoness monster battle an opponent's monster while this is already face up in your spell and trap zone, you can banish that opponent's monster. If this card on the field is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can target an Amazoness monster in your graveyard and special summon it. The second effect essentially turns Amazoness monsters into DD warrior ladies, which the archetype highly appreciates, since banishing everything after they have already battled is actually a fantastic option, and not to mention it also shuts down graveyard effects. So essentially they decided to improve the idea that Amazoness Trainee brought to the table. And yeah, this essentially turns the Amazoness monsters into very nasty little things that can basically out-resource you if you're not careful. And the special summoning effects are also pretty neat, although they will barely ever go off. But again, the option's nice if you want to take it, so I'd say run 3 of these at all times. And their final card is only a part of the archetype due to lore reasons, and that is half counter. During damage calculation, if a monster you control is being attacked, target that monster you control. That target gains attack equal to half the original attack of the attacking monster until the end phase. I get where they were going for, being an archetype heavy on the battle phase and all that, but if you really crave on an effect like this, then I would really suggest that you run Metal Morph instead of this, because Metal Morph is continuous, and yeah, it only works when you are attacking, but still it provides much better results than this thing. And fun fact, this card in the anime was actually used by Aki Izaiwe, of all people, the main female lead of 5Ds. So yeah, the Amazoness archetype appeared in like 4 different Yu-Gi-Oh shows, like Dual Monsters. They were used by Mai Kujaku, in GX by Tanya, and 5Ds that one card was used by Aki, and how could I forget the Arc 5 fusion monsters, and also Amazoness Spy were used by the Tyler sisters in Arc 5. So yeah, I forgot to list them in when I was introducing the archetype. But anyway, it is time for some tribal grades. In terms of consistency, due to the fact that the majority of the archetype are level 4 or lower warrior monsters, and they have access to a lot of stuff in terms of like Warrior Lady of the Wasteland, Rhoda, Giant Red can search out most of them. Marauding Captain is actually a very nice choice in the archetype. So in terms of consistency, they actually have a very nice amount of it, and even the internal archetypal consistency in form of the new support has boosted them up quite significantly for me to give them a very solid 3 out of 3. Now, in terms of power, their powers are usually rely on the Amazoness Queen or the fusion monsters to hit the field. Well, it isn't much, and but with some of their other cards and some of their generic boosts they have the potential to hit really hard. So that's all that matters here. So I'll be giving them a 2 out of 3 in that regard. Now, as for the comeback ability, once you basically clear the field of Amazoness monsters by any non-battle removal ever, you've basically shut them down for good, and there's pretty much no way they can come back from a beatdown unless they make an emergency Amazoness Empress or basically do something that can basically turn the tide of the duel around. So yeah, very specific, so 1 out of 3 goes there as well. Protection only exists in form of Amazoness Empress and Amazoness Scouts, but Amazoness Empress type of effect is so unbelievably powerful that I feel obligated to give them a 2 out of 3 in that regard, just for the sake of it. And now in terms of versatility, due to the fact that they are warrior monsters and earth monsters as well, one of the more popular attributes in the game, I will give them a solid 3 out of 3 due to the sheer amount of stuff they can actually produce. They can even pull off some decent builds, such as with Gagaga Cowboy, Gagaga Samurai. Utopic Zexal is also a very nice option for them. So yeah, they have access to quite a lot of stuff, if you ask me. So that's why they deserve that much in terms of versatility. And yeah, Amazoness archetype is actually one of my favorites when it comes to some of the older archetypes. They still don't compare to Fortune Ladies, not by a long shot, but their artwork is can actually give them some spot in the Hall of Fame when it comes to the archetype's visual designs in my book. So if they should receive some new support, I would really like to see that, because yeah, like I said, I'm really a real fan of their artwork and the new support that has basically revitalized their age-old battle phase focused playstyle to a new level of playability, and I would like to see it expanded upon in the future. So anyway, that is it from me. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned for more Red Focuses and updates. Comment, like, and subscribe. Be sure to check out my Patreon when you got the time. Maybe drop a few donations if you feel like it. And I'll see you all, and have a good day. And tomorrow I have a special double header when it comes to videos. You'll see soon. See you all, and have a good day. Peace.